Reflecting on it, it's difficult to say exactly when the cracks in our marriage began. Mary and I had built what appeared to be a stable life together, but maybe the years of routine and subtle neglect were gradually eroding it. We spent so much time focused on the kids and the daily grind of running a household that I never noticed how distant we'd become. Life with 4 children, a demanding job, and financial pressures turned us into more of a team than a couple, but I never expected that to be the beginning of our unraveling. It wasn't until later that I realized how far apart we had drifted. For years, I believed our relationship was just evolving, more practical, less romantic. It wasn't that we stopped loving each other, we just stopped showing it. We took each other for granted, assuming we had plenty of time to reconnect. But time doesn't wait, and life threw challenges at us that exposed how fragile our bond had become. In my opinion, one of the hardest things in life is letting go of someone who has been by your side for nearly 2 decades. 18 years of shared memories, both joyful and painful, create a bond that's difficult to break. What makes it even more painful is realizing you can't be with them anymore. Sadly, many people chase after new excitement instead of appreciating what they already have, and that's exactly what this story shows. It's been 3 years since our divorce was finalized. Mary and I were married for almost 18 years before we separated. We were high school sweethearts, marrying soon after graduation, and at that time, we were each other's only romantic partners. There's something special about that, a testament to love beyond just physical attraction. But you often don't recognize that until it's too late. We shared the joy of raising 4 children together, Amy, Brad, Carla, and Daryl, affectionately called the Alphabet Kids. After Daryl was born, I had a vasectomy to avoid adding more letters to the alphabet. While Amy and Brad are now in college, Carla and Daryl still live with Mary, my ex-wife. What caused our seemingly happy family to fall apart? We appeared to be content, involved parents, supporting our kids in everything they did. Like many young couples, we struggled financially, with me working in a manufacturing plant and Mary at Walmart. Once the older kids were in school, the younger ones went to daycare when we couldn't be home. It was a compromise dictated by modern life. I often wondered how our parents and grandparents managed when women typically didn't work. Was it societal pressure or materialism that led us here? We wanted all, possessions and instant gratification. In the beginning, our love life was vibrant, as it is for most young couples. But as our family grew, physical engaging moments became fewer. This, perhaps, is a universal experience. We thought we didn't have time for affection. Looking back, the real problem was that we took each other for granted. Our once passionate love life turned into rushed encounters focused on physical satisfaction. The emotional depth we once had was gone. It became routine, not because the love had vanished, but because we neglected to nurture it where it mattered most. After I was promoted to a supervisory role, our finances improved as the kids grew. We'd occasionally go out for dinners or movies, trying to bring some life back into our relationship. It seemed like a phase. Many marriages go through a time where love endures, but familiarity leads to complacency. One day, Mary came home and said she wanted to go out with some female coworkers. Since our kids were old enough to manage on their own, I didn't mind. This was about 4 years ago. Mary dressed up in slacks and a blouse, looking beautiful. Like many women, she worried about her weight, but she always looked great. When she got back, I asked about her night, and she talked about the evening with her coworkers. While I didn't hold anything against Walmart, I noticed many of her friends there were either divorced or separated. I voiced my concern, saying they might not be the best influences. I never said anything like that, I clarified. I'm just worried that these women might be looking for relationships and you'll get caught up with them, I added. Her reaction showed I'd hit a nerve. We had been together for 18 years and I knew her well. Curious, I asked if she had danced with any men that night. After a pause, she admitted, I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, I danced with a couple of guys and that was it. Though I felt there might be more to it, I didn't push. She mentioned wanting to go out with her friends once a month, and while I wasn't thrilled, I decided to wait and see. The next month, she wore a skirt and pantyhose. As she got ready, she remained quiet. I told her I would stay up for her. When she came home after midnight, I noticed she had changed. Worried, I asked, You were wearing pantyhose when you left. Where are they? It was hot, so I took them off, she responded casually. Mary, this is getting out of hand. We need to talk, I said firmly. She asked me to leave the room so she could undress. I pointed out that she had been undressing in front of me for 18 years and questioned why that night was any different. In a rare move, I walked over to her and grabbed her arm. something I had never done before. "Jerry, please, I'm begging you, don't do this," she pleaded. As I reached under her skirt and discovered she wasn't wearing underwear, she seemed to already know what I was going to do. Pushing her away, she began to cry, clearly upset by the situation. "So I guess that explains why you're not wearing pantyhose, doesn't it?" I remarked. "I'm sorry, Jerry. It just happened. I was at a party, had a few drinks, and Joe kept telling me how beautiful I was. He kissed me, touched me, and I've never been with anyone but you, Jerry. The girls were all complimenting Joe, and I let it happen." "No one man slept with you. You had more than one, didn't you?" I asked. "When Joe had me on the bed, a couple of other people were present and things got out of hand," she admitted. "They didn't take you. You willingly let them. Does our marriage mean nothing to you? Did you not think about me or the kids?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Jerry, I'm sorry. It wasn't love like we have. It was raw sex, and I liked it. Barb, one of the other girls, is married and told me she and her husband are into swapping. I don't want to lose you, Jerry. Please, come with me one time and try it," she begged. I needed time to think. My mind was racing. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore. I couldn't grasp what had just happened. We agreed to talk the next day, and I spent the night on the couch. The next morning, after the kids left, I got dressed and went to work. Mary was still asleep from her wild night. Unable to focus, I took the afternoon off and went to her workplace. She was working as a cashier that day, and Barb was at the register next to her. "Why aren't you at work, honey?" Barb asked, eyeing me. "I'm meeting Jeff, our lawyer, today. I'm getting a divorce," I said, then turned and left. Mary called out to me to wait, torn between her job and our situation. I ignored her and quickly left, packed my belongings, and left a note for the kids explaining our divorce. I wondered how she would explain it to them, probably blaming me as she often did. I found myself at my parents' house. They were in their 60s and had celebrated over 40 years of marriage. I told them about the separation from Mary, likely leading to a divorce. I could feel their discomfort since they liked Mary, and this news was a shock to them. They offered me a place to stay, and I accepted. Their basement had been fully renovated, with a cozy bedroom, a small kitchenette, and a living room. They said I could stay as long as I needed since they rarely used the basement anymore. After Mom's hip replacement 2 years ago, they had moved the washer and dryer upstairs, as they didn't like going up and down the stairs anymore. I may digress a bit as I tell this story, as there's a lot to unfold. I know you're curious about Mary, the kids' reactions, the lawyer's advice, and other perspectives. When I talked to my parents, I vaguely mentioned that Mary wanted more freedom, finding it hard to explain her interest in exploring other relationships. I didn't tell them the full truth, simply saying we had differing views and couldn't agree. My parents weren't satisfied with that explanation, but it was all I could give at the time. Later, I met with Jeff, our lawyer, who told me that Mary had already contacted him twice. I asked him about his representation, pressing him to clarify if he was representing her or me. "Jerry, she doesn't want a divorce. She thinks you can work this out," Jeff explained. "Just answer my question, Jeff. Are you her lawyer or mine?" I asked again. "I'm hers, Jerry. She called me first, and I took her case. I'm sorry. If you had called first, I'd be representing you. Please talk to her, Jerry. You're both my friends, and I hate to see you headed for divorce court." "Did she tell you why I left, Jeff? Why I want a divorce?" I asked. "She said there was a fight about her going out. She drank too much and was unfaithful to you." "Let's be real, Jeff. She ignored my concerns, slept with 3 men, and then asked me to swap partners with her friends. That's your case, Jeff. I'm calling Sally Black. We both know she's the best in the state. I'll have her contact you after we plan." "Thanks for nothing, Jeff," I said as I left. Sally had a reputation as the toughest divorce attorney in the state, known for her no-nonsense approach. I knew several men who had faced her in court and had unfavorable outcomes. When I called her, she scheduled an appointment for the next day and advised me not to talk to Mary until we met. I asked about the kids, and she suggested having my parents let them know we'd discuss things soon. After my parents talked to Amy, our eldest, Mary called the house a couple of hours later wanting to speak with me. I refused, and my dad told her that my lawyer had instructed me not to talk to her that day. He assured her that I would contact her after meeting with my lawyer. During the call, my dad told her he didn't understand what was going on, but mentioned how upset I seemed. Angry that Mary was trying to shift the blame, I decided to confide in my father. I told him the truth and asked him not to tell Mom, as it would break her heart due to her affection for Mary. Tears welled up in his eyes as he left the room, revealing his softer side. The next day, I went to work and informed my manager about the divorce proceedings, asking him not to forward any calls from Mary unless they were urgent. Focusing on work helped distract me from the chaos with Mary. Afterward, I met with Sally, a polished yet business-oriented professional. She got straight to the point. "Jerry, what outcome are you hoping for here?" she asked. I admitted that I wasn't sure. I told her that I still loved Mary, but I couldn't accept the lifestyle she had chosen. I expressed my concerns about the kids and my refusal to enter an open relationship. Sally understood my concerns, and although I trusted Mary wouldn't bring random people into our home, her previous betrayal had shattered that confidence. Sally then said, "Jerry, people face situations like this all the time. We can approach it however you prefer. I know you'd rather keep the affair private, especially for the sake of the kids. You'll need to provide for them, and we can easily figure out what's fair. You're in a position to decide how much you want to give or hold back. While we could use the affair as leverage, our main ground will be irreconcilable differences. Does that work for you? As your lawyer, I'll follow your lead." I replied, "I'm making good money now, and with her working too, $500 per week in child support seems fair. As the kids get older, we can reduce it by $50 per week. No spousal support is necessary, and support ends when the kids turn 18. I'll also cover medical expenses. College support is optional, up to me. Legally, I'm responsible for the next 6 years, since our oldest is 17 and our youngest is 12. Does that sound reasonable to you?" "What about our savings, my retirement plan?" I asked. "All savings will be split equally, and any joint bills will be settled. You each get one of the 2 vehicles. Your retirement is off limits. The house and furnishings are the last major items. What would you like to do with them?" "Our house is worth around $200,000, with $60,000 left on the mortgage. But my kids live there, so I'm not sure what's best," I said. "I have a suggestion," she offered. "In cases like yours, where revenge isn't the goal and children are involved, it's often best to let her keep the house until the kids are grown, say around 21. After that, you can sell it and split the proceeds, or one of you can buy it for half its value, minus the mortgage. She'll pay half the mortgage until then." There was a lot to process. Why wasn't I enough for her? I wondered. 18 years gone. I suppose we could go with that plan. "What if Mary or Jeff objects?" I asked. "Then we go all in and bring up the infidelity. I doubt they'll want that. If they fight, we'll seek custody and an equal division of assets, with no alimony since she won't have the kids," Sally reassured me. I took the next day off, and Sally contacted Jeff, telling him we had a proposal for him and Mary, and asked if they could meet at her office at noon. Jeff hesitated about meeting at Sally's office, but agreed, knowing he had little choice. Jeff and Mary arrived together. I assumed he had told her to wait for him in the parking lot. We sat down at the table, Sally and I on one side, Jeff and Mary on the other. Jeff, familiar with Sally, wasn't thrilled about facing her. "Good to see you again, Sally. I know how you work, and that you prefer to get straight to the point. Before you present anything, Mary would like to speak with Jerry privately." "No," I said. "She already had her chance the other night. I'll only speak to her after the papers are signed. We all know why I'm seeking this divorce." Looking directly at Mary, I said, "If you're concerned about your private life becoming public, please consider my offer." "I think it's very generous," Sally added. "That clears that up." "Mrs. Cohen, Jerry has made you a fair offer," Sally said, handing a copy to both Mary and Jeff. "He'll file under irreconcilable differences. He's offering a reasonable income while the children live at home. The only issue up for debate is the house, and I believe Jerry has been more than fair." Jeff spoke again. "We need some time to review this and possibly propose a counteroffer. I'll discuss it with Mary and get back to you in a couple of days." "Just so we're clear, Jeff, there will be no counteroffer," Sally responded. "If you reject this, which would be unwise, Jerry will file for infidelity and seek custody of the kids and the house." Mary looked up, tears streaming down her face. Sally was firm, and seeing Mary's distress hurt me deeply. She grabbed a pen and asked where to sign, not even reading the document. Her tears flowed as she feared losing custody of the kids. "Mrs. Cohen, please calm down," Sally urged. "Jerry doesn't want to hurt you or the children. Take a day or two to review it as Jeff suggested. Maybe we missed something. I apologize for being so firm, but it's important to stress that this is a very generous settlement. Jerry is doing his best for you and the kids. Take the document, talk with your lawyer, and we can reconvene tomorrow." Sally handed Mary a box of tissues. Mary glanced at me as her tears started to slow. "Jerry, despite everything, I still love you. I was hoping we could take some time apart and maybe work things out, but It seems like you've already made up your mind. No, Mary, you made the decision for me. You wanted the freedom to do whatever you wanted, and I'm giving it to you. All I ask is that you keep your affairs away from our kids, or I'll take them from you. That's a promise. Mary started crying again as she quickly left the building. Jeff said goodbye, telling Sally he'd likely see her the next day or the day after. Sally turned to me and mentioned that I seemed to have the upper hand in the case. I responded by saying there were no winners here, only losers. I'd lost the only woman I ever loved, and my kids were now part of a single-parent household. This wasn't a victory, it was just a fair resolution. My daughter Amy brought the two younger kids to visit me at my parents' house. I was thrilled to see them. They kept asking questions about our family situation, and I repeatedly explained that their mom and I were having difficulties, didn't agree on some major things, and had decided to get a divorce. I reassured them, telling Daryl, "I'll be at your games no matter what, and Carla, I'll be cheering for you during volleyball season. I'll always be part of your lives." After hugging and kissing them, I gave them my cell number, emphasizing that they could always reach me at their grandma's house. Brad came a bit later with a serious question. "Dad, did you cheat on Mom?" "No, Brad, I'd never betray your mother like that. Why would you ask?" "Well, Jim from school and Travis, our neighbor, both said their parents divorced because of cheating. I just wanted to make sure you didn't do something like that. I love you, Dad. I'm going to miss you." "You won't miss me. I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here for you. It'll just take some time to get used to the new situation," I reassured him. Once the divorce was finalized, I kept my commitment to the kids and attended most of their school events. I often saw Mary during these occasions. No matter her personal life, she remained discreet. Despite everything, we kept things amicable. We celebrated the kids' birthdays and other special occasions together. The only rule we had was that she wouldn't discuss her dating life with me. Our conversations focused on the kids, holidays, and my parents. The only topic off limits was her romantic affairs. On a few occasions, when she began to mention a male friend or something similar, I'd excuse myself from the conversation. The agreement Sally and I prepared was signed by everyone. Though I wasn't present when Mary came to sign it, Sally later told me Mary found it hard to accept. We had some minor disputes with Jeff over which credit cards each of us would pay off, likely his way of trying to save face. I told Sally I'd cover the payments if needed. Eventually, we canceled all joint credit cards and got new ones in our own names. I stayed in close contact with the kids. They told me that their mom seemed to have come to terms with the divorce and was somewhat happier. When I asked if she was dating, they said, "Nothing serious, but she sometimes goes out with her female friends." Hearing that made me cringe a bit. I never had that deep conversation with Mary. She wanted the freedom to explore, which didn't align with my values. In my upbringing, marriage was about building something lasting, not searching for new experiences. My parents had been married for over 40 years, so maybe we married too young, and she didn't get to explore what she was looking for. I never explored anything beyond our relationship either. I was content with Mary. A couple of years later, I began dating again. I went out with a few women from work, most of whom were divorced, like me. I made it a rule never to date a married woman, even if she was separated. It was just something I felt strongly about. I had physical relationships with some of these women, but it never felt the same. Despite treating them well, my thoughts always drifted back to Mary. It's strange how hard it is to leave the past behind and move forward. I really tried, but none of the women I dated truly resonated with me. The best moments I had were during family events when I could see Mary. One night last year, I went out with some guys from work to a lounge where women often gathered. To my surprise, I saw Mary there. It was clearly a girls' night out, and she was with a group of women, though no men were around. I didn't recognize most of them except for one coworker of hers, but Barb wasn't there. I decided to approach Mary from the side to catch her off guard. "Would you care to dance?" I asked. "Jerry, what are you doing here?" she replied. "Just out with the guys, waiting for someone? Or how about a dance?" I responded. No, not waiting for anyone. "And yes, I'd love to dance with you. Let me introduce you to my friends," she said, quickly listing off several names. "These ladies are part of our card club. Once every 6 months, we skip the cards for a night out, and tonight happens to be one. So how about that dance?" We moved to the dance floor, and I held her close. "Feels like old times, doesn't it?" I remarked. She smiled at me as I pulled her closer. After 2 slow dances, the band switched to a fast song. "I've never been good at these," I said, escorting her back to her table. She seemed a little disappointed when I left her there. "Ladies, it was nice meeting you. I'd better get back to my friends. I said, walking away. Something didn't feel right. I didn't want to stick around to see if she'd be approached by someone else. I told my friends I had to leave and said my goodbyes. As I glanced back on my way out, I saw Mary watching me. The next day, Mary called, happy to see me and enjoy our time together. She asked if I'd help plan Amy's wedding reception, even though it was still a year away. I suggested it might be too soon, but she explained the need for early reservations. I advised her to talk to Amy first, and once they had ideas, I'd handle the finances. She agreed to reach out to Amy. I wanted Mary to know that one dance didn't mean we were getting back together. A month later, I called to check on the wedding plans, but Carla said Mary was out with friends. I felt a bit annoyed, but couldn't justify it since we've been divorced for over 2 years. Curious, I asked if Mary went out often, and Carla said it was about once a month. Feeling restless, I called my divorced friend Pete, and we decided to hit the lounge. The place was packed, and to my surprise, Mary was there with a group of men and women. I brushed it off and decided to enjoy myself. I spotted an attractive young woman in a mini skirt and said to Pete, "Check out those gals." They were sitting near Mary's group. As I walked by Mary, she noticed me, but I kept going and asked the young woman to dance. "Sure, I like older men," she said loudly enough for Mary to hear. We danced closely and I introduced myself as Jerry. I couldn't help but notice the men at Mary's table staring at Rachel's legs, so I playfully tugged her skirt a bit. We stayed on the dance floor, even when the next song was fast, knowing it would probably bother Mary since we never danced to fast songs together. When a slow song played, I pulled Rachel close, and she smiled as I gently squeezed her. Afterward, I walked Rachel back to her table, hinting at another dance later. Pete returned after dancing with someone else, and as I sipped my drink, he mentioned an attractive woman heading toward us. It was Mary. "Would you dance with me?" she asked. I pretended she was talking to Pete, but she insisted. I introduced her to Pete as my ex-wife, and his jaw dropped. While dancing, she whispered about Rachel being all over me. I reminded her that this was why we got divorced. "You wanted me to be with other women so you could be with other men," I said. "Jerry, I was wrong," she admitted. "That's all you can say. Maybe I should do the same with Rachel and just say I was wrong. But we're not married now, and when you cheated, you were my wife." Suddenly, a man approached, upset that Mary was dancing with me. "You're my date, and you asked him to dance?" he said. I told him to back off, warning him he wasn't going anywhere with Mary that night. He asked if I was her husband, and I said, "Yeah, and you better leave before you end up in the hospital." Mary pulled away, angry, and returned to her table. I warned the guy not to mess with her, and he backed off. The 2 women we danced with earlier joined us at our table, and we moved to a booth, getting more physical engaged. This wasn't my usual behavior, but with Mary watching, I played along. Pete seemed close with his partner, and it was clear these women were there to hook up. The blonde with me asked if we were ready to leave, mentioning she was feeling hot and eager. I asked her for a favor first. Tell Mary her wish for the night was about to come true. She smiled, delivered the message, and came back. Mary looked furious, but by the time she could get up, we were gone. Later, we had an encounter with the women at Pete's apartment, even swapping partners. While the night was fun, I woke up feeling empty, realizing I was missing love. When I turned my phone on, I had 10 angry messages from Mary. She blamed me for ruining her night, which oddly felt satisfying. I called her around 9 a.m., and she ranted about how much I hurt her before falling silent. "How does it feel, Mary, knowing the person you love is with someone else? This is the life you chose. You're free to be with anyone, and so am I said before hanging up, hearing her sobbing. Weeks passed without contact until she reached out asking to talk. "Jerry, I know it hurt seeing me with someone else, just like it hurt me to see you with that woman. But I realized what I did was even worse," she admitted. "Mary, it's over. You can be with whoever you want. I just wanted you to feel what I did. Jerry, I haven't been with anyone in 2.5 years. The last time was a month after you left. It wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't love. I realized men were just using me. That's not who I am. I was wrong and I can't prove it, but I'm not that person anymore. I don't want that life. I want the life we had." 2.5 years? What about that guy a few weeks ago? He said he was your date, I questioned. "He was a friend of someone at the table. The others were married, and since I was single, he assumed I was available. But I had no plans beyond maybe dancing. He didn't even touch me because you threatened him," she said. "I did tell him to back off," I admitted. "Well, he didn't do anything. I went back to the table because you embarrassed me. Then you sent that woman to let me know you were leaving with her. Did you sleep with her, Jerry? She asked. Mary, we're not married anymore. I make my own choices. She then mentioned her friend Barb and how their group had fallen apart after failed attempts at partner swapping led to divorces. I found it odd she brought that up, but I shifted the conversation to Amy's wedding plans. You already know all the details. Amy's told you everything, and we didn't think you wanted to be alone with me, so she handled the planning, Mary explained. I'm not afraid to be alone with you, I insisted. Oh, really? Then take me on a date, she teased. I don't think that's a good idea. It might give people the wrong impression, I replied. You still love me, Jerry. You just won't admit it, she said. I do love you, but the pain of what you did is still there. When you cheated, you took a piece of my heart, and I don't know if it will ever heal. God, I'm so sorry. I ruined everything, and I live with that guilt every day. I've even thought about ending it, but the kids need me. I was hoping maybe one day we could get back together. I didn't know what to think anymore. I had never spoken to her like this, and hearing her confessions threw my mind into turmoil. I still wanted her. I loved her, but I also hated what she had done to me and to our marriage. What if she followed through on her thoughts? Was she trying to make me feel guilty? I needed more information before I could trust her again. The idea of her taking her own life was unbearable. I used to think I knew her well enough to detect lies, but now I wasn't sure. I had to confirm the truth. But how? We all have dark thoughts sometimes, but thankfully we don't act on them. I needed to say something. But what? Mary, I'm getting hungry. How about joining me at Red Lobster for lunch? We can talk about what to get Amy for her wedding. All I heard for the next 30 seconds was her crying. Then she quietly said, I'd love to. Mary, you have to understand this isn't about romance. It's just lunch and a conversation about Amy's wedding. I understand, she replied. I could almost sense her smiling. I picked her up, and there she was, waiting on the porch. She looked beautiful in a lovely outfit that highlighted her legs. She practically ran to the car, smiling as she got in. We kept the conversation light, avoiding any heavy topics. She mentioned buying a dress for the wedding and suggested I get fitted for a tuxedo. I knew I'd have to wear one, but no guy looks forward to that. Without thinking, I asked if she'd come with me to see how I looked in the tux, realizing I hadn't worn one since our wedding nearly 22 years ago. She seemed surprised, and so was I. It just slipped out, a habit from when we were married. Yes, I'd love to. Just let me know when, she said. I couldn't take it back, so I told her that the following Saturday would be fine. I realized I needed to be careful. I might be getting into trouble. At lunch, we both ordered iced tea, as we always used to. We had so much in common. I could feel the tension building, knowing we were walking a fine line between trying to resolve things and reopening wounds that hadn't healed. Mary, there's something I need to ask you, and I need the truth. Once you answer, we won't revisit this topic again. Were you serious when you mentioned thinking about taking your own life? She looked at me, tears forming in her eyes. Don't worry, I won't cry. I've done plenty of that over the last 3 years, she said. To answer your question, yes, I thought about it. I went out once after you left, and as crazy as it sounds, I did it to get revenge on you. Revenge? I don't understand, I said, confused. I was so confused, feeling abandoned and lost. I know it wasn't your fault, but at the time I wasn't thinking clearly. I went out again to hurt you, but it wasn't enjoyable. When things went bad, I left, and he insulted me, calling me a strumpet. I slapped him, kicked him, and went home crying. The kids were asleep, and I felt like my life was over. I grabbed a bottle of sleeping pills and was ready to take them when Carla asked if she could sleep with me. She said she needed me. Holding her in my arms, I broke down and prayed for help. A calm came over me, and I realized my kids needed me. And maybe, just maybe, you'd see a change in me and want me back. Her confession moved me to tears. I didn't know how to respond to the depth of what she had shared. Thankfully, our meals arrived, and we shifted to talking about the food. I wasn't sure if I could fully believe her, but her emotions seemed real. Later, I suggested we see a comedy movie to lighten the mood. After I dropped her off at home, she invited me in, but I declined, saying I needed time to think. Before she left the car, she leaned over and kissed me. I didn't resist. It felt right, like a piece of the past I didn't know I missed. I love you, Jerry. Don't forget that, she whispered, before getting out and heading inside. Something still felt off. She had mentioned twice that she had only engaged in the swap activity one more time, a month after I left. I wanted to trust her, but the story didn't add up. Swap clubs require a partner. Who was hers? It couldn't have been Joe because she swapped to be with him. Where was her man when she was fending Joe off? And then there was the self-destruction attempt. She repeatedly mentioned considering it, but only now told me about the sleeping pills. I wanted to believe her, but I needed answers. My biggest concern was where she had gone every month for 2.5 years, and with whom. The kids never mentioned anyone new, and they usually told me if something felt off. Maybe she was being truthful, and I was just being suspicious. But something in my gut told me there was more to the story. Much of our time was spent preparing for Amy's wedding. I had lunch with Mary, Amy, Brad, and Amy's fiancé, Ben. We were headed to get fitted for our tuxedos. I felt like a penguin, but both Amy and Mary insisted I looked handsome. Time flew by, and before I knew it, we were at the wedding rehearsal. I went to the church and followed instructions without any issues. As Amy and I walked down the aisle, I added some playful touches like skipping. Nothing inappropriate, just enjoying the moment. I remember the pastor saying that the next day would feel different and we might be nervous, so we should try to remember our parts. I thought to myself, yeah, just walk down the aisle and later say, her mom and I. How hard could that be? Afterward, we all went to a restaurant for dinner. I made sure to attend since it was something I didn't have to pay for. Before leaving, Mary approached me. I hadn't spoken much to her that evening. Jerry, I'll see you tomorrow, she said softly, but her tone carried an unspoken meaning. Something in her voice made me lean in and kiss her. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the joy of the event. She smiled, and I left. The next day, I arrived early at the church as instructed. The bridesmaids and ushers were already there, and soon the guests started arriving. I felt nervous as I watched Mary being escorted to the front row. She looked absolutely stunning, and her radiant smile made me feel a bit jittery. How's my penguin today? She teased with a laugh. He's scared to death. His daughter's getting married, and his wife has never looked more beautiful, I responded, realizing the truth in my words. It's all right, honey. Everything will be fine. You'll do great. Just don't step on Amy's dress, she reassured me with a smile. I went to the back of the church to wait for Amy. When she appeared, I felt tears well up. She looked like a younger version of Mary. It's okay, Daddy. We've got this. Mom said to tell you she loves you and to remind you not to step on my dress, Amy said, making me chuckle. She was so much like her mother. As we started down the aisle, I kept repeating to myself, don't step on Amy's dress. Tears filled my eyes as I escorted my little girl, realizing this moment captured everything: love, family, friends. When we reached the front, many guests had tears of joy in their eyes. I wasn't the only one moved by the emotions of the day. Who presents this woman for marriage? The pastor asked. Caught off guard, I thought, me and Mary? No. Her mother and I finally said. As I sat next to Mary, she smiled through her tears. I whispered, I had one simple line and I messed it up. You did great, honey, she whispered back. Throughout the ceremony, I held her hand tightly, maybe too tightly, but she didn't complain. She just sat there, smiling and crying. I was relieved when the service ended, though we still had to endure the photo sessions. At the reception, I felt the need for a drink and quickly got one. The atmosphere was lively and everyone was having a good time. Amy and Ben made a lovely couple, and people kept commenting on how nice it was to see Mary and me together. Mary smiled each time but didn't say anything. When the dancing started, there was a special parent dance. I led Mary to the floor and we danced while the crowd applauded. Looking at our kids all smiling and seeing my parents give me a thumbs up, it seemed like everyone believed in us, except me. After the wedding, Mary asked if I could drive her home, and I agreed. When we arrived, she asked if I was coming in. I can't. The kids will be home soon, and I don't want to give them the wrong impression, I said. They already have the wrong idea. They're staying with your parents tonight, sleeping in your bed. So, your only choices are my bed or Brad's, she said with a smile. Now, are you going to open my door? At that moment, I made a spontaneous decision. She clearly wanted me, and I decided to follow my heart. Still, I was cautious not to take things too seriously, as I had unresolved questions. I walked her to the door, opened it, and she invited me in. Jerry, there's no pressure here. We don't need to talk about marriage. I just want to spend a night with you, like we used to, she said softly. Inside, we undressed slowly. She looked more beautiful than I had ever seen her. She smiled and said, It's your love for me that makes me look this way. That night, we were passionately together. as if we were trying to rebuild what we'd lost over the years. It felt natural yet complicated. In the morning, after one last physical moment, she made breakfast. "Jerry, I'm not rushing you or pressuring you. I'll wait as long as it takes," she said, looking at me hopefully. I smiled at her, but deliberately didn't kiss her goodbye when I left. I wanted her to know that while the night felt good, I wasn't ready yet. The night had stirred old feelings, but I was still dealing with the hurt. Now, I had a new dilemma. Mary and I had rekindled something, but I had lingering doubts. Something didn't add up. She had been alone for almost 3 years, and suddenly, over the past year, she had been actively pursuing me. It all felt too easy, too convenient. I needed answers. When I returned to my parents' house, everyone had left. My dad noticed my unease and asked if everything was okay. I told him something felt off, and I needed to figure it out. Despite it being Sunday, I called Sally, my attorney. I explained the situation, and she also found it strange. She suggested I stay quiet for a couple of days and mentioned hiring a private investigator to get to the bottom of things. Mary called on Monday to invite me for dinner. I declined, explaining that I had other commitments and needed to take care of some business. I didn't reveal the growing unease I felt, as I was still trying to make sense of everything. By Thursday, Sally urgently summoned me to her office during work hours. When I arrived, she shared some disturbing news. My suspicions about Mary were correct. She had been involved in a swap club, and her partner was Jeff, her lawyer. After I left, Jeff had seamlessly taken my place. Mary had continued this lifestyle while hiding it from me. Curious, I asked Sally why Mary had re-entered my life after a year of freedom. Why disrupt my peace? "It's about money, Jerry. Over the past 3 years, she's borrowed $100,000 against the house. Instead of owing $60,000, you now owe $160,000, Sally explained. Confused, I asked, "How did she get the money without my signature for the house loan?" Sally clarified. "It wasn't through a typical house loan. When you agreed to pay off the credit cards, one of them was a cash equity loan. You could keep borrowing against it up to a certain limit, and now it's nearly maxed out. Jeff managed to sneak that past us. Once you took responsibility for the credit loans, there was no way to track it. I should have followed up after the divorce. But it's not standard practice unless requested, and Jeff certainly wasn't going to ask." I sat there in shock. Sally continued. "During the night you spent with Mary, I reviewed her medical records. She hasn't been prescribed sleeping pills in the last 3 years. I contacted her doctor, who confirmed this. He also mentioned she attended all her physicals every 3 months, though only 6-month checkups were recommended. I asked about STD tests, and he confirmed she's clean. At least covering her medical bills gave us that insight. "So, Sally, what do we do now?" I asked, feeling the weight of the deception. "The only remaining debt is the house. We'll place a $40,000 lien on it. If she ever sells, you'll recoup that amount. Unfortunately, the rest is lost. As for the kids, 2 are independent, and the other 2 are old enough to choose whether they want to stay with your ex, with you, or with your parents. Given that you plan to move out of state, they may prefer to stay here and finish school." "Thanks, Sally. I guess it's all on me now," I said, feeling overwhelmed. "Make sure to freeze the equity on the house. If the kids decide to stay with my parents, transfer the child support payments accordingly." Back home, I had an honest conversation with my parents. I made it clear there was no chance of reconciliation with Mary, even though my father already knew much of the situation. I recounted the story, explaining how Mary had cheated on me. While I had hoped she'd changed, she continued to deceive me. If she had been honest, maybe we could have worked through it. I knew this hurt my parents, but they needed to understand the truth. Later, I went to Mary's house while she was at work and told the kids about her infidelity. I spared them the more complex details of our relationship. I had given Mary chances to change, but she never did. Even after the wedding, I found she was still lying. Forgiveness and trust were no longer possible. I also told them I was moving to another state. They could choose to stay with their mother, me, or their grandparents. Both younger kids chose to stay with their mom. Despite the possibility of boyfriends, they assured me she never brought anyone home. Carla mentioned that she never saw unfamiliar men around, except for Jeff, whom they had known for years. I couldn't bring myself to tell them Jeff was one of her lovers. They all cried, saying how much they'd miss me. I reassured them that I would be only 5 hours away and that they could visit any time. "When are you leaving, Dad?" Brad asked. "Next week. Once I'm settled, I'll give you my address and phone number. I love you all, and I'll always support you," I said, trying to comfort them. Later, I called Mary at work, something I hadn't done before. "Mary, let's meet at the tavern. We need to talk, away from the kids." She told me she'd be off work in an hour and agreed to meet. I had a feeling she thought her plan had worked and that we might reconcile. When Mary arrived at the tavern, she looked hopeful, probably thinking this was the start of us getting back together. She sat across from me, and I could sense her nervousness. I got right to the point. "Mary, I've been thinking a lot. With Amy's wedding and our night together, people assume we're getting back together, but it's moving too fast for me. Do you realize no one knows why we divorced in the first place?" I paused, watching her reaction. "I've looked back at your life over the last 3 years. Where's the pain I felt when I found out about your infidelity? It seems like it didn't even faze you. Sure, you've had financial troubles, but that's about it." Her expression shifted from hope to confusion. She could sense this wasn't going the way she expected. "Our night together, it was something else. You did things we never did before. You always said those things were too explicit, but there you were, embracing them. It made me wonder where you learned those new skills." "Jerry, I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "Just listen. You told me you hadn't been with anyone in 2.5 years. Why lie? You had your girls' nights out, but it turns out your friends from work and the card club were part of a swap club. So you've been involved this whole time," I said, feeling the sting of betrayal deepen. Mary started crying again, her tears flowing quickly as she struggled to find the right words. "Your involvement with other men caused our divorce, and you never stopped. Explain it," I said, trying to stay calm. "Jerry, go home and tell the kids why I left in the first place. Let them know how your desires overshadowed our relationship," I added. "God, Jerry, you didn't tell them about me, did you?" she asked, panic in her voice. "It's always about you, Mary," I replied sharply. "Never about the kids or me. Yes, I told them about your affair and infidelity." "Jerry, I'm so sorry. You left me. What was I supposed to do? I'm a woman and I need love," she pleaded. "You don't want love. What we had the other night was love. What you crave is endless pleasure with multiple partners. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? How naive do you think I am? I even wondered what would happen if we remarried and you cheated again. Then it hit me. Your lover, Jeff, orchestrated this whole scheme." "Jeff? How did you find out about him?" she asked, shocked. "Oh my God, what have I done?" "You've destroyed lives, including your own. You lost a man who genuinely loved you and was thinking about reconciliation. Your kids still live with you, but you've deeply hurt them. You lie, cheat, and now you want to take away the love I once had for you. But all I see now is a deceitful person who will keep doing this with anyone in a couple of years. Think about what could have been. Your looks will fade, your kids will leave, and so will the money. Maybe you'll have a few old acquaintances left, and of course Jeff, but I doubt he'll stay once you're broke." She sobbed uncontrollably at this point. "Jerry, I really love you. Please don't leave me. I'll go to therapy or do whatever it takes." I looked at her and calmly said, "By the way, I'm moving out of state next week. Thanks for the final encounter. You're talented in bed, and I'm sure you know that. Just like God and the many others. Goodbye, Mary. Have a good life." I had a strong suspicion Jeff was behind all of this. Remarrying would have voided our previous agreement, and Mary and Jeff manipulated me for financial gain. Even with her mounting debts and extravagant spending, she kept living her high life. It was clear she had dug herself into a deep financial hole. What a foolish woman. Eventually, I moved on. It hurt for a while, but I began to put it all behind me. Did I love Mary? Absolutely. But her betrayals were too much to bear. It's been a few years now, and I've met someone new. She's a few years younger than me, beautiful, smart, and funny. She's divorced with 2 kids who are just entering their teens. When I asked about her divorce, she explained that her husband had cheated on her. He wanted the so-called good life, involving other people. That wasn't for me. I'm a one-man kind of woman. I have to think about what's best for my kids. I told him to find someone who thinks like that, but it's not me, she explained. After a year of dating, I proposed. One evening, she asked me, "What do marriage vows mean to you?" "To love, honor, and cherish until death do us part, for richer or poorer in sickness and in health, to be faithful to her alone," I answered confidently. She smiled and said, "I can do all that, except for the obey part." I laughed. She knew about my alphabet kids and found the story hilarious. Her son's name was Aaron, and her daughter was Faith. We got married, and all my kids attended the wedding. At first, they were hesitant. But after meeting her, they saw the kind, gentle person I did. Amy and Brad were already married, and Carla was dating. Daryl and Carla were still in college, but they understood that I needed someone in my life. My parents also attended and quickly fell in love with my new wife. They knew my life was back on track. She looked stunning, petite, and incredibly attractive. The thought of any man wanting to share her was unimaginable to me. After a brief honeymoon, we stopped at my parents' place. I showed her around my hometown and the house I used to live in, which Mary had to sell because of her debts. Luckily, I got $30,000 from it, thanks to Sally, my lawyer. When we returned home, we began our new life together. It was simple, but we were happy. We enjoyed every moment, and our physical moments were amazing. We did have one issue to address, though. You see, my new wife's name was Maria. I remember her looking at me one day and saying we needed to sort that out. She didn't want me to ever call her Mary, so we settled on Honey. She didn't mind what others called her, but from me, she only wanted to hear Honey. I jokingly asked, "Can I call you sweetheart sometimes?" She smiled and replied, "That's fine too. When we're physical engaged, you can call me anything you want, just not Mary." We both laughed. I'm not sure what Mary is up to these days. I've removed her from my life. The kids say she's living alone in an apartment and seems to be doing okay. As for her dating life, they think she's seeing someone but doesn't talk about it much. They mentioned she cried when she found out I got remarried. Of course, they love their mom and keep an eye on her. They told me, "She'll be fine. I hope she's left her wild ways behind, but I guess I'll never know." I do remember her last words to me. "Jerry, I truly love you, and I want you to know that. I'll wait for you. I believe you'll come back to me. I'll be here as long as it takes." And my response to her was, "Forever is a long time to wait."